Well, hello and welcome to the Movie Paradise. I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár, and I'm joined by our co-host, Rob Giachinta. Rob, thanks for being here.
No problem.
And today, this is our open spoiler discussion for Joker. We're talking all things about the movie Joker, so if you have not seen Joker, please refrain from this spoiler discussion. You can go check out some of our spoiler-free material talking about the film, or maybe you just don't care about spoilers and you can watch this video anyways. To be honest, there isn't too much huge spoilers for this film. It's more part of the experience of seeing the movie is you don't really want to know how it unfolds. But it's not like there's any huge Avengers Endgame level spoilers in Joker.
Yeah, we really didn't know what the plot of the movie was, to be honest, till we. Yeah.
Exactly. Part of the fun is seeing how it unfolds. So let's just start this off by giving our first impressions of the movie and what we think. And Rob, I'm curious for you to start us off with what are your first impressions, first thoughts overall on Joker?
Well, when it was first announced that they were making this movie, I was kind of just well, I mean, I like that they're doing a standalone, maybe possibly R-rated kind of comic book movie, but I don't know. I never thought Todd Phillips was really the right choice for this, but after a really great marketing campaign and featured two excellent trailers, I was beyond pumped to see it, and I have to give Todd Phillips a ton of credit because I thought I think this is my favorite movie of the year. I was riveted from start to finish. Really only had a few minor problems we can talk about later, but overall it was just a really enthralling, thrilling movie with Joaquin Phoenix probably giving his best performance I've seen him give.
Yeah, I would completely agree with everything you said. I thought Joaquin Phoenix was fantastic. I agree, probably best performance I've seen from him. Granted, I haven't seen all of his movies, but from the ones I have seen, this was the best he's been. The direction was fantastic. The writing was great. The cinematography was gorgeous. The score was haunting. That score added so much to the movie. That scene when he first kills the people in the subway and then he's in the bathroom and he's just dancing. That's just fantastic.
I listened to that today, actually.
Say it again?
I listened to that today. You can listen to the soundtrack. It's awesome.
I was listening to that today as well. Because it was this thing where it was the voice of Todd Phillips as he was talking about the scene and how in the script originally he wasn't supposed to be dancing in that scene at all, and it was something where they had the piece of music, and while on set, Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips were listening to that music, and Joaquin Phoenix started dancing in that really creepy way that he dances in the scene, and Todd Phillips was like, "Hey, let's use it, let's do it," and that's the scene. There's so much you were mentioning this to me before, Rob, that they strayed away from the script in a lot of places with this film.
Yeah.
Which I don't know the ins and outs of what was scripted and what's not, other than that one scene that I was just mentioning. But the overall film is just, it's a gut punch. It really is. And there's so many great moments in this film, which I'm sure we're going to have a lot of parts to talk about. But just what really resonated with me in watching this movie was seeing this journey that Arthur Fleck was going on, brought to life so brilliantly by Joaquin Phoenix, and just seeing how broken he was and how nobody was willing to extend a hand to help him. Just the amount of sheer indifference surrounding him. Was it a very nihilistic view of the world and ultimately probably pessimistic? Yeah, it was. But for what this film was, and for who Arthur Fleck was, and his journey from who he starts out at the beginning of the film to who he is by the end when he shoots Murray, his evolution as a character was fantastic, and I just loved going on that journey with him.
I thought it was almost a realistic portrayal of the world back then, because if you think about it, we weren't as accepting as a society as we are today. I feel like we treat the mentally ill and all sorts of other groups of minorities or whatever way better than we did back then. And I think it was a pretty accurate reflection on the times and what it could do to somebody.
Yeah. Well, I think just in general, there is like a little bit of a heightened realism. Like it's going for realism,
Yeah,
but it's
sure.
not necessarily our real world as it currently exists. There is that sort of like with any movie you're gonna have. There's that little suspension of disbelief, that little elevation of reality, which exists in this. One of the biggest things that I loved about this movie was its portrayal of the city of Gotham. You really felt it. Like it had character to it. Like it felt grimy, it felt gritty. The way it portrayed this sort of class warfare where you have no middle class. You essentially have the uber rich, which are represented by the Waynes, and then you have the poor, who don't receive any of the help that they need. And it demonstrated this divide between the two classes, and the way it showed that and the way it presented that, I just thought was fantastic. And then it makes it make ultimately a lot of sense how someone like Arthur Fleck within this society becomes someone like the Joker. Because I don't think it's just Arthur Fleck on his own that would ultimately lead to the Joker. You need this sort of societal indifference. And the way that the movie presents that, I just thought it did it in such a fantastic way. And that was one of my favorite elements of the movie.
Yeah, it definitely. It definitely. I know it's called Gotham, but you definitely the whole time like are picturing like a '70s New York. At least that's how I was feeling the whole time. Like they don't. I mean, isn't Gotham always supposed to be technically kind of like New York, anyways?
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah. So I mean, they did a good job of that, and I want to talk about. You mentioned the cinematography. I don't know. I was looking. The guy Lawrence Sher, I believe that's how I pronounce it. He was a guy who's worked with Todd Phillips for a lot of movies, and like you watch some of his other movies that he's done, and like it doesn't stand out, but it just for this, I got to give him a lot of props for this movie because this is some of the like usually when you're talking about like the best cinematography of the year, it's either a Deakins or some of those other guys that but I truly think this might be the best one of the year we've had so far, and I got to give a lot of credit to that man.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful. The way that they shot it, just the way that you needed striking visuals to tell this story, because so much of what's going on with Arthur Fleck as a character is internal. And while it is Joaquin Phoenix's job to be able to convey that internalization and to convey that through his motions, through how his posture, his cadence, how he walks, how he laughs, how he expresses his face, while that is his responsibility to be able to show that, part of that is also how they choose to shoot that, to be able to get inside of his head. Because just from a filmmaking standpoint, you could have the exact same scene, but you communicate two completely different things if the camera is really far away from the subject and if the camera is really close to the subject. And with this film, the cinematography, they made such deliberate choices in how they shot the film, how they framed things, how they showed Arthur Fleck and how they showed the Joker, where it was telling a story in of itself. And it really worked so well in adjacent to Joaquin Phoenix's performance. It was just, you're absolutely right. The cinematography in this movie is stunning. It's some of the best of the year. And it's not like these giant sweeping shots like if you look at something like Avengers Endgame where you have like giant tracking shots of all these characters doing all these things. There are epic cinematography shots like that. But then there's also something more personal, like with the Joker, where it's not going for flash with its cinematography. It's
and
more
no,
about
like, green screen or anything like that either. It's all real life environments and stuff like that.
It's capturing its characters and telling a story through the way that it captures its characters. And that's something that through all the different elements of this film, the cinematography, the score, the performances, the direction, the writing, every single element is just furthering the storytelling of this movie, of ultimately telling the story of Arthur Fleck. So I'm glad you were talking about the cinematography because it's some of the best of the year.
Yeah, and then I mean, might as well talk about the score too. Like you said, we already talked about it a little, but the score in a way kind of like is telling its own story in the background, which I really loved. If you listen to like it tells you exactly how the character's feeling.
Yeah.
I can't pronounce the lady's name,
Yeah.
but she previously had done. Sorry, ma'am.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to either.
But she previously did the score for Sicario Day of Soldata, and that was an excellent score too. And I think she's even better here. It's a score that I just started listening to today. It's very creepy and very eerie, and it really works for this movie. And initially going into Joker, like I was just excited to see the movie. I wasn't necessarily expecting like it to be like technically like an A+ in a way, but it really surprised me on that in that way.
The score does such a great job of, like I was talking about, how all these different elements of the movie really feed into that ultimate narrative purpose. The score does such a great job of that, of communicating the character of the Joker. Just when I listened to the score, I listened to it and I was like, yeah, this sounds like Joker. This sounds like the tragedy of the Joker. And when you're watching the film and you hear this score in context, it adds so much to the movie. It really gets under your skin, and it's not a score that's like over the top. It really is just sort of this like base layer of audio that really gets under your skin and just adds to the ultimate visceral feel of the movie overall. The score is just absolutely fantastic. And didn't the person who did the score for this, didn't they do Chernobyl?
Oh, yeah. And that was an excellent score, too. That was fantastic. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very similar, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I've really never watched Chernobyl, to be honest.
But so she's got a pretty bright future ahead of her.
Yeah. But, so the score, the cinematography. I mean, what more can we say about Joaquin Phoenix? I feel like everyone said everything there is to say about Joaquin Phoenix. It's his best performance that we've seen from him. I mean, and just, it's funny how the character of the Joker, even though the character is so radically different in all the movies, it's one of those characters that actors love to sink their teeth into. Like, it's a dream role for an actor, because there are no rules. It is a boundaryless character that you can really take in any way. I mean, I'm curious to ask you. I mean, the characters of the Joker in both The Dark Knight and this movie are so radically different. Like it's hard to compare them. But in terms of the performances, Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix, what do you think?
Well, what I was gonna say is, when you were saying it's a role actors like to sink their teeth. Well, look who we've had play all the Jokers. The first three people to play the Joker all are Oscar winners. Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger. I mean, even though some people really don't like the Jared Leto, he's a phenomenal performer, and it is just a role that tends to like attract like A-list talent to it. Yeah. But with Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix, obviously, I don't know if I'm going to give an overall performance. I mean, maybe I have to give it to Joaquin Phoenix because, I mean, he has more to do in this movie than Heath Ledger does in The Dark Knight. But granted, they're two different characters, I think. Yeah. I don't think Joaquin Phoenix's character fully becomes the Joker till about like the Murray Franklin show, or maybe a little bit before that. But with Heath Ledger's, he's strictly the Joker from start to finish. So it's kind of hard to compare them in a way. That's why I really hope we can see another movie, because I want to see a full movie where he is just completely Joker now. Because just the scene like where those two cops are like getting pummeled by those protesters, and he just like looks at them and like waves and skips away. Like it was like so perfect and so creepy. That's when that whole sequence is when I knew I was like, I love this movie.
Yeah. That was great. The one thing I wish that the trailers didn't show as much of the third act as they did.
Yeah, no,
That
I agree. Like when he was I'm trying to think. When he was going in the cop car at the end, like I knew someone was gonna like drive into him because I remember the shot in the trailer with like the taxi like
mhm.
flipping up into the ambulance and stuff like that. So I was just waiting for it at that point.
Yeah. And especially a lot of those shots from the subway at the end
Yeah.
and like a lot of the riots, they showed so much of that in the trailers that I
Hmm.
thought that there was going to be a lot more of it than there was. And
Yeah.
I think that moves into probably my biggest criticism of the movie. And it's hard to really say that it's a criticism because it's more of a shortage in my expectations of the film. Because I was looking for that whole sequence, because the movie is a slow burn. It's definitely a slow burn. It's building and it's building and it's building to something. And as I always say, like, I always appreciate slow burns. But really, what makes a slow burn work is when you get that payoff at the end. Because otherwise, it's just meandering. Like, take something like Alien, where it's a slow burn. It takes a while to get where it's going. But when it gets to it, it's so worth it that it makes the whole experience all the richer. And then when you have a case where it's a slow burn, but it doesn't reach the point that you want it to reach, it feels like, okay, so why have I been watching this? With Joker, I was expecting a little bit more than what we got at the end. I feel like it didn't quite hit that peak of absolute anarchy and chaos that I was looking for, personally, when I was seeing the trailers and when I was getting excited for the movie. Now, it's kind of hard to fault the film for that, because that's my own expectation getting in the way of my enjoyment of that part of the movie. You know, it's kind of hard to blame Tom Phillips and say, you didn't do what I wanted you to do. It's not his fault. You know, he made the movie he was going to make. And that's part of, Rob, you and I, we're seeing the movie again on Monday. And that's something I'm really excited to see now that I know the whole stretch of the film. Now that I know exactly where it's going. I want to see, what do I think of it again, now experiencing it, knowing how it goes.
Mm-hmm. I've seen it 2 times, and if I'm going to delve into some things I want to be critical about,
Yeah.
I don't know, but so now watching it a second time, I feel like the middle part of the movie isn't as great as the beginning and the end, like the first and the third act. Mainly, I feel like there's some pacing issues, especially with, I don't know, watching it a second time, the scene where when he goes to Thomas Wayne's house and he talks to Alfred and stuff, I don't know. I don't know if that really needed to be in there, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, that whole thing kind of
slowed down the movie to me.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that's probably more of an editing thing than anything else. But
Yeah.
I'd say that scene is important for a lot of things to happen, especially setting up what happens with Thomas Wayne later in the film.
Yeah, I mean, granted, they could have just had the Thomas Wayne scene.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's again, just really, I only have a few like nitpicks. Another thing, I don't know if you had a problem with, but so the whole part with the Zazie Beetz character, when it's revealed through her saying like, "Who are you, Arthur? Like, don't you live? I think you're in the wrong thing."
Mm-hmm.
I kind of liked it when it was just that, and it left it at that, and it kind of, you just had to think about it and be like, oh my god, this guy was like making this up. But then they go back to the flashbacks and like show you, oh look, she wasn't there. And I don't know, I felt like I was kind of being spoon fed almost, and I was like, I don't need that. I figured it out on my own. You did a good enough job of showing.
I completely agree. That's what when I was watching that scene, that's what exactly I was thinking. I was like, because when we got to the point in the film where it was Arthur and Zazie Beetz' character in the hospital after his mom had had, what was it, a heart attack or something like that, something along those lines. Stroke. When she was there and she was there with him and kissed him or something and walked out, it was then that I thought in my head, I was like, oh, she's not real. She has to be a figment of his imagination. Now in my head, what I thought it was that the entire character was made up and that she wasn't real at all. And then we, of course, found out that she was real. It's just the extent of which he had a relationship with her was completely overblown in his head. But I completely agree. When we were watching that scene unfold, and she's like, I think you have the wrong house or something like that. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah,
and then they showed all the scenes, and I'm like, we don't need to see every single instance where she wasn't real. We got it. We figured it out.
I will say something funny though. So I saw the movie 2 times, and both times I saw it with our friend Randy. So I saw it the first time, and then when we saw it the second time, that scene was happening, and they were showing the flashbacks, and then Randy says to me, he's like, wait, she wasn't real? Like, these weren't real incidents? And I was like, no. Like, we fucking listening to the movie.
Wait, that was the second time he said that?
Randy said, like, he didn't get it. The first time he watched it, he didn't understand that. I was like, how did you not understand that?
Wow.
I was like, they just like spilled it out to you.
They literally opened your jaw and said, like, open up, and like stuck the spoon in. Yeah. I agree.
But I did like in some ways how it was ambiguous. Like another part, like, so once that scene's over, he's just walking down the hallway after he says, I had a bad day. And I kind of like that they didn't show that, did he kill her or did he not? We don't know. I think he did, but I like stuff like that. I also wish they didn't have a flashback of his mom when he read the adoption papers, because I think that it could have been even more ambiguous to, well, did Thomas Wayne make all this up, or was he actually adopted? But still in my head, I still don't believe that he was necessarily adopted. Why would they let that crazy woman adopt a child? Like, I don't understand that.
Well, like you kind of said, it was an older time where that kind of, they didn't have those regulations or restrictions as much as they would today. Right. Yeah. So, but I agree. I think a case can be made that showing the instances where Arthur's imagination takes over sets the precedent that when they show what is false or what is made up in his head, that's when it's actually made up and everything else is real. Because otherwise you could say, well, is any of the movie real? Is the whole thing just in his head, and the only real part is when he's in Arkham at the very end and it's just all in his head? But at the same time, that would have been cool. That would have been fun. Like, I like that level of ambiguity. I can understand why, as a filmmaker, you wouldn't want to have that degree of ambiguity where you're questioning whether the entire movie is even real. I can understand why you wouldn't want to have that, in which case the steps that they took were probably necessary. But at the same time, that level of ambiguity is fun. I think that, and especially for someone like the Joker, who is as unhinged as he is and as disconnected from reality as he is, that level of ambiguity makes sense. So, I think
he's a character you can never trust. You know
exactly.
What I mean? He's
an unreliable narrator. Yeah, definitely. So, so I do have some criticisms with the film, but they're mostly minor. And like I said, it was more about my shortage of expectations. But the movie overall is great. And so I'm curious to ask you, I talked a little bit about this on the Movie Paradise show on Saturday. But having seen the movie now and seeing it a couple of times, with all the controversy, quote unquote, that surrounded this movie, how it glorified violence or how it was, all the stuff that was said about it. Having actually seen the movie now, what is your take on all that?
Honestly, I was so triggered by this movie. Like, I'm about to take to the streets and protest of this movie. It shouldn't be in theaters, Nathanael. I don't know what to tell you.
It's too dangerous.
People that were complaining about the violence, okay, like, people want to be like, John Wick this, John Wick that. Okay, scratch that, because that, I don't even need to talk about that, because like that those are kind of fantasy, almost like over the top kind of movies. And while this is like a more real, there's been way more realistic type movies with way more violence than Joker. So I don't understand where any of that came from.
Yeah.
But also, I never felt like do they show you like ways like that you can sympathize with this character? Yes, but then they also show you like why you should, in which he starts murdering people
Hmm.
that were innocent, and I think that's what makes him a great character. Is like he's the best kind of villains. Like we always say, are the ones that you can understand where they're coming from, but you don't necessarily root for them.
Yeah. And it's nuanced too. Like it's not a
Yeah.
black and white thing where you can have sympathy and empathy for where the character is at, the fact that Arthur never received the help that he needed, that you have all the because he's when the movie starts, he's seeing a psychiatrist and he has medication, and then we find out that there are like budget cuts across the city and he isn't able to see a psychiatrist anymore and he's not able to take his medication anymore, and you can sympathize with the situations that the character is in and how he gets to that point. But I think any rational human being understands that that sympathy is cut off the second that he starts killing people. You know,
Yeah.
we can sympathize with the situation he's in and the circumstances that happened to him and how he got to the place that he is, and we can have conversations about the measures that we can take as individuals to make sure that people get the help that they need, that they aren't put in that position. But all of our sympathy goes out the window the second that he starts picking up guns and shooting people. And I
Or
think
when he's going into Zazie Beet's apartment and like she did nothing wrong, you know what I mean?
yeah, exactly.
Like, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think anyone who tries to equate it that, oh, well, the movie props him up as a sympathetic character, therefore you're supposed to stand behind him when he kills people, that doesn't make any sense. I think at that point you're forcing it. Now,
Forcing your agenda.
Now, I can understand because one of the things people were saying was that in this movie, like some of the. Now, granted, most of this was being said, most of this controversy was being said by people who hadn't even seen the movie. Which is why I waited personally to even comment on it until after I'd seen the film, to see what the movie was actually saying. But a lot of what was being said was that the movie is portraying Joker as a hero, that they're propping him up as he's the hero. And honestly, they're not completely wrong in saying that. Now, the difference is that I don't think the movie was propping up Joker as a hero or anything like that. But it was presenting him that for this disenfranchised class of people in Gotham who weren't getting the help that they need, that were continuously being screwed over by the rich, they were seeing him as a hero. They were seeing him as a symbol. And I think Zazie Beetz' character, who coincidentally is in Joker's head, says at one point, she's like, oh, they see the guy who did the subway murders. They, people see him as a hero. And maybe that was Arthur's own own consciousness kind of feeding that to himself. But the movie does kind of take on that position a little bit. And at least it presents Joker as a symbol for different things. For class angst. For anger and rage at the system. At society. At disenfranchisement. At the disparity between classes. It does prop him up to be that. But I don't think the movie in any way presents him as a hero itself. It's more the characters and the society that the movie is painting props him up to be that.
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. And I think we as film fans, I think this happens way too much, that just because a movie portrays something doesn't mean that it's condoning it or endorsing it or that the filmmakers necessarily even agree with it. I think we get into this so much like, oh, this actor in a movie said this. That means it must reflect on how they as a real human being actually think. Or, oh, this writer wrote this character to do this. that must be a reflection of who they are as a person. Or this movie shows this, which means all the people who made this movie, all 350 people involved in the making of the movie, must believe this. We need to get away from that line of thinking and realize that a movie is a movie, and what it shows is independent of what anyone in real life actually thinks. And there are definitely movies out there that have bad things in them, where the movie itself is propping it up as a good thing or having it be part of its message. Look at the 1920s Birth of a Nation. That movie is propping up the KKK and racism and all that. So it's not like that doesn't happen. But I think we need to be able to discern a little bit more the difference between a movie like Joker, which just shows characters, presents events, and shows things. The difference between that and something like The Birth of a Nation, which is actually taking on disgusting, revolting things as its message of being the film.
Yeah. I also think the fact that this movie was called Joker is what really built up the whole controversial thing. I feel like if this, think about it like another movie. You know what this movie reminded me of? Nightcrawler, in a way. I don't know if you agree.
No, I was literally just thinking that. Yeah.
But no one saw that movie really, and no one ever talks about that movie. So there was never a controversy around that because no one really gave a shit. The fact that it was just called Joker is what started this whole nonsensical controversy, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, it made headlines because it had a recognizable name, and I really think the whole controversy itself ultimately stemmed from a couple of comments in a couple of the early reviews that then were just taken and run with on the internet, and it turned into this big whole thing before the movie opened.
Yeah, and those are just people's reviews. That's their opinions. Everybody should just wait until they saw the movie to make their own opinion.
Yeah. So
great. If someone wants to come out with an article now after they've seen the movie and explain to me why they think this movie is dangerous or portraying something in a certain... Fine. You've seen the movie. That's your opinion. Fine. But all this pre-stuff was just ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So anyways, I was curious to know what your thoughts were on that whole thing.
Well, now you know.
Yeah. Now I know. Going back to the movie, one criticism that I've heard from a lot of people is that Joker isn't the Joker enough in this movie. That there's not enough of him as the Joker, or that when he does become the Joker, he's not the real Joker. Which I don't know exactly what that means, because this is its own, it's literally like they took a character and just wrote their own thing about it,
That's not the Joker from The Killing Joke.
But to me, while I do kind of wish we got a little bit more of a taste of the full makeup, full crazy Joker, I was fine with it. Because this was really a movie about the transformation of a character. Of Arthur Fleck, from the beginning when we first meet him, and his first line, which I think is such a brilliant opening line to the movie, which is it just me or is the world getting crazier out there, or something like that. Such a great first line to really, in one line, understand his mindset, how he views the world and what's going on. But this was a movie about his transformation. And to me, watching the movie, I was just riveted by seeing him evolve and change. And you could tell that things were changing inside of him that we didn't always see expressed. And then it felt like once we got to the end, him donning the makeup and going on the Murray show and all that, that was the expression of everything he had been working on internally.
Yeah. I have to say, I remember when the first photos of him in the makeup first came out. I always do this, but whenever I feel like a lot of people do this too. Whenever we see a photo of what something looks like, we're always just like, that doesn't look right, that blah, blah, blah. And then you see it in the movie, and honestly, I think this is just the look of Joker might be my favorite look of Joker we've ever had. It's just a more, like, realistic version of it, I think.
Yeah. And I was one of those people. I put out... I did not... When we saw that... Because you remember that, like, first real thing...
I remember.
Of Joaquin Phoenix, and then it, like, spun around, and he was wearing the makeup... And I was one of those people, I was like, this looks terrible, this isn't good, and
we do it every time, though, for everything.
Yep. And I put out, at the time, I put out a video, and I was like, it was like, this is clearly not going to be the final makeup in the movie, because we've been here, yep, it was like, this is a transitional makeup before we get to the real Joker, and of course, just like me proclaiming, there absolutely will not be time travel in Avengers Endgame. Just like that proclamation. Yep, I was wrong. Per usual.
That scene they showed in the trailer was not from the final battle.
Yep. Well, but yeah, no, I agree. The makeup in the movie worked. And it made sense. It made sense because of where the character was coming from, in that he had done the clown, like he had been a clown for hire for, I don't even know if that's the proper terminology, but you know, he had been that. He had been
professional clown for hire.
he had been that, so it made sense. Something we haven't had a chance to talk about is the laugh, which I thought was just a stroke of genius. Was the fact that the laugh was an actual medical condition that he couldn't stop. That was just brilliant. That was just absolutely brilliant. It was one of those great ways of taking a comic book and adapting it for the real world and keeping the spirit of the comic, but also doing something different with it. I just thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, and I love, like, the little card he has that he, like, gives to people and stuff. And I love how, like, if you watch it, if you pay attention, like, he gives that card to that lady, and she doesn't give it back, and then when those guys are on the subway, he goes to reach to the card to give it to them, and it's not there.
Oh, I didn't notice that. That's great.
You know what, another little thing I thought was, like, I don't know, like, it was kind of like maybe like a dark but humorous moment, where, like, when he's in the beginning of the movie, when he's, like, beat up in the street, and, like, he's, like, on the ground, like crying almost, or just, like, painting. And then, like, before, like, the big Joker title card comes on, like, he, like, grabs his side, and you know how, like, clowns have, like, the water that shoots out of the flower? He, like, just, like, grabs his side and lets, like, the water come out of the flower. And I thought that was really cool.
That was cool.
Another little thing is, so maybe this was just my mind, or just my pick. When he's doing all those dancing and stuff, I thought, was he doing, like, the moves he was doing with the sign twirling?
I don't know. Wait, when he was in the bathroom?
Yeah, like, because, like, he was kind of, like, moving his, like, arm, like, if you I look like an idiot, but, like, he kind of, like, I thought that's what he was doing, to be honest with you.
I don't know if he was specifically doing those moves, but I think there is kind of a larger idea of, like, of dance, and the way because he dances a lot in this movie. Yeah. Which isn't something I was expecting to say about the Joker. Oh yeah, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. Oh yeah, he dances a ton in the movie.
I love when he dances over to the television, to the camera at the end after he shoots Murray. That was so great.
Like, I don't know. I think it was part of just his expression, because there weren't a lot of things in Arthur Fleck's life that he was able to express himself or do something that made him happy or brought him joy of any sense. And it seemed like whenever he was dancing, that was just a calming thing for him, a kind of cathartic thing for him. And that's what I think when we get to that part where he's going down the stairs dancing, like in the full Joker, that's what made that so great, was because you already had an understanding of Arthur Fleck's relationship with dancing, and then to see him kind of full force, you know, not holding back in any way, just strutting his stuff down the stairs.
Yeah.
You know?
And how dare they put that song in there? How dare they? Even
That
though they
song-
put that song in legitimately every single sporting event I've ever been to in my entire life.
Yeah. I think it's another case of people reacting to it without actually seeing the movie.
Like, do I condone what that man did who wrote that song? No. But if all these other mediums play that song and all other things, how are you just going to get mad at this one instance? I just don't.
But, and the biggest thing for me is that people are overlooking the context of when the song is used.
Agree, yeah.
The fact that the Joker is dancing and laughing and smiling while this song plays that was made by a convicted, rapist, like, that says so much about his character. That says so much about who he is, and generally, do I think putting in music made by people like that when they'll get royalties or whatever, do I generally think that's a good idea? No. But for something like this, it had a point to it. Like, it had purpose, and it had like an extra level of irony to it, and it said something about his character that was ultimately chilling. And I think that's something when people haven't seen the movie and just hear, oh, the song is used, and they jump on it without knowing any of the context, or how it's used. I think that's a dangerous thing to do.
Another thing that kind of relates to that is, like, you said, like, he would be, like, dancing to a song like that. It kind of, like, you can see it in his mindset, like, when he first commits those killings on the subway, like, he, like, immediately then goes to Zazie Beetz' house and, like, makes out with her. But we now know that wasn't real, so, like, we can kind of infer that that incident kind of got him aroused in some sense, or turned on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think. I think it was just kind of... I think what the movie was showing was that Arthur Fleck had never... He even said as much. He'd never been happy a day in his life. And then when he killed for the first time, there was something about it that just resonated with him. There was something he got out of taking another person's life that he had never gotten out of anything else in his life, which is absolutely just disturbing and chilling, but that's exactly the Joker. That's exactly the Joker. And I think then we kind of see, like, that's why after he does the shooting, he goes into the bathroom and he dances, and then he has that fantasy about, going in and kissing Zazie Beetz' character. And then we see how he comes into his own the more that he kills, to the point where he's on the Murray show and he's wearing the full makeup, and then he shoots Murray. And it showed what that kind of release of for him for killing someone, what that did for him and how that resonated with him as a character. And then ultimately having taken that step and gone down that path, how it just further went and further went and further went until we ultimately get to the end of the movie.
Because, and you could also say, like, when he first killed those guys, in a way he was defending himself. But as it grows towards the movie,
with
he's
the
not
first
no longer
guy,
just defending himself.
Maybe the first two. By the third guy, when the third guy is like crawling up the stairs and then he just starts shooting him in the back, at that point, that was no longer self-defense.
Yeah. But even, and the other thing is, even say like he shot those two guys just out of self-defense, even if he went to the police and said it was self-defense, who the hell would have believed him? He would have went straight to jail. Yeah.
Because the people who he was against were the Wall Street kind of upper class people that exactly set up this whole divide between the rich and the poor that's in the movie. And I thought that positioning was genius.
And keep going.
I was going to change subjects a little bit, so if you had another thought, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to, it kind of translate, like, even earlier in the movie where his boss is like, give the guy his sign back, and he's like, I got jumped, and like, why would they steal the sign? And, like, just no one, like, believes him, or you're just, like, it's just stuff like that just adds to the character. Just boiling up his rage, especially like when he's still talking and like his voice drowns out and it's just like zooming in on his face and stuff like that.
Mm, exactly. The thing I was gonna say was just that I thought there was an interesting commentary about the media in this movie, which I don't know if you picked up on all the newspapers that were in the movie, but if there was the biggest scene of this was this scene where I think Arthur was on the bus or something. It wasn't the one where he was like playing with the kid or whatever, but he was reading the newspaper and then I think he cuts out the Wayne's pictures. But the front page of all the newspapers says "kill the rich," or no, it says "kill the rich," and then it says it's talking about the murders that had happened on the subway. And it was interesting how it was showing the newspapers kind of feeding into this rhetoric. And then ultimately you do have the people rising up and killing the rich. And I think it was subtle. It was background. But it was interesting commentary on the relationship between the media propagating and trying and kind of like stirring ideas, and then ultimately what happens with them, which I think is incredibly ironic with everything that's happened with this movie.
That's exactly what I was just about to say.
With all the sites and everything talking about how the Joker's going to inspire all these killers and everything, and it was. I thought that was so funny when I was watching them. I was like, "That's really cool." There's no way Todd Phillips could have known that degree of the parallel, but just I thought that was really cool.
I think it kind of just like in a way like I feel like he's like once they see the movie, like, do you think like any of these media think to themselves like, oh yeah, maybe we're the problem? No, they don't. But like you're right, like it's just like the media can just make things bigger than they actually are, I feel like, and it happens all the time with Twitter and all sorts of things. But I mean, granted, this was just like a newspaper but I mean that's how people got their news back then. But yeah, that's I was thinking that I was picking up on that too.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. So bringing our discussion to a close, unless if there's any other big things you wanted to discuss about the film.
I'll discuss. I wanted to just touch on two I thought were like the best lines of the movie in my opinion were the one where he's on the Murray Franklin show, and this line I thought pretty much like almost like came straight out of The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's Joker. And it was the line where he says like if I was dying in the street, you'd just walk right over me, but like these guys get killed and everybody goes crazy. And it reminded me of the line in The Dark Knight where Heath Ledger was like I say one gangbanger gets shot, no one blinks an eye, but I say one little old man is gonna get hurt, and everybody goes crazy. And I just found that those kind of similarities from Joker to Joker were really cool.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That was one of my favorite lines too. And one of mine also was probably the most telling line about the Joker in that exact same scene when he's arguing with Murray and says, like, what do you get when you mix a mentally ill patient or a mentally ill person with a society that doesn't care? You get what you fucking deserve.
Yeah, abandon him. Yep.
Yeah, abandoned. There we go. That was the term. That was probably the most telling thing about how Arthur Fleck, getting into Arthur Fleck's view and perspective on everything that happens in this movie.
Yeah, and the other line, that was a good one too, but the other line I was going to talk about was the last line of the movie that he says when the lady says, like, oh, could I hear the joke? And he goes, you wouldn't get it. And I was just like, oh my God, that was awesome.
That was a great part. That was a great way to close out the whole movie.
Yeah, because when he was standing up on the cop car, I thought the movie was over. I don't know about you.
Yeah, me too. I didn't expect it to keep going, but I'm glad it did. No. I'm glad it did. Though.
So once that scene started happening, I was like, oh, they should just ended it. But then we got that whole thing, and I was like, all right, I'm glad they had it.
Yeah. And there was one more thing I wanted to talk about, which was the whole part where we see the Waynes die again. And then so when I was watching that happening, I was like, okay, all right, whatever. We've seen the Waynes die how many times in movies before? Do we really need to see it again? But when it worked for me was that there was that shot of like a little bit after it happened, and it was kind of like in a montagey part of the young Bruce Wayne standing over the dead bodies of his parents. And it was fleeting. But what that shot said to me was it was talking about, in the midst of all this evil and anarchy and chaos of what was going on, and how, you know, the city was rising up and it was tearing itself apart, and they're killing the rich and overthrowing everything. And in the midst of all that, there was this one kernel of good that came out of it. Because you know, if you follow the story in your head, that kid's ultimately going to become Batman.
Who?
Yeah, who is this man of bat of which you speak? But
I thought it was a Joker movie.
But you know that kid's ultimately going to become Batman, and you know what Batman represents. And so it was kind of like this moment, small glimmer of hope amidst all this evil that was going on. And when we saw that shot, I was like, you know what? I am glad that we saw the Waynes die again. Because I think for this movie, it had a specific purpose, it had a specific impact, and I think it meant something for this movie, and I think it had something larger to say.
Yeah, no, I think without that scene, there really is no hope at the end of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Without that, there is no hope. But that's that tiny little bit of hope that shows that maybe something can change. Because the whole movie's talking about the indifference of society and how people don't care about each other. And then it says, well, maybe someday there will be someone who comes along who does care. And that is ultimately Bruce Wayne, who becomes Batman. And that's his whole mantra. So, anyways, to sum up my thoughts, I really like this movie a lot. I don't know if it's my favorite movie of the year. I'm going to wait and see how I think about it, seeing it a second time. Maybe, because that last year, last year, that's what happened to me with A Star Is Born. I saw it the first time. I really, really liked it. And then I saw it the second time. I was like, okay, now it's my favorite movie of the year. Maybe that happens with Joker. But right now...
Came out the same weekend, same studio. Todd Phillips, Bradley Cooper were both involved.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and they're so alike, you know. Bradley Cooper singing, Joaquin Phoenix is dancing, you know. They're all connected. But
they could be in the same world.
They could very well be. But I'll sum up my thoughts with saying that I thought this movie was just it went for something so completely different. Not just from any other comic book movie or anything like that, but just in general, like what it discussed, what it talked about, the performances, the cinematography, the score, all these different elements. It did it in such a great way, in such a visceral way, in such a gritty way. And I walked away from the movie. It's weird to say that this is an enjoyable movie. Because it's not like it's not an Avengers Endgame level of enjoyment, but
Joker assemble.
Yeah, but it's just there's something about it. It's just it has that quality. It's intriguing. It's captivating. You know, you watch it and you're hooked on the character because you want to see where this character is going to go. You want to see this world fleshed out. It has all those things that you're just riveted watching this movie, or at least I was. And so maybe my position will change a little bit after we see it the second time. Maybe I'll like it a little bit less. Maybe I'll like it even more. I don't really know. But I'll say, in summing up my thoughts, I really, really like this movie a lot. And I think this is such an impressive job all around for all the people who made it.
You gonna give it a score? Or?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4.3 out of 5.
Good. If I had to sum up my ending thoughts, I'd say I got to give Todd Phillips again a lot of credit. I really didn't think he had this in him, but after seeing this now, I hope he. I mean, not that I liked The Hangover, the first one. I like some of the other comedies, but I hope he sticks to movies like this more and does more dramas and stuff like this. And I really hope we can get, maybe not, if we can't get another Joker movie, another movie set in this world, because I think there's infinite possibilities to continue this. Yeah. And do you want to say something?
Well, no, go ahead. Finish your thoughts.
And yeah, it just career best performance by Joaquin Phoenix, and just technically this movie's brilliant, and it was just very compelling, and I was enthralled from start to finish for the most part, and I'll probably give it a 4.6 out of 5.
Nice. All I was gonna say was that you and I had talked about a little bit about what our pitch would be for a Joker sequel.
Yeah.
So would you like to tell the audience what our pitch was for the sequel?
Well, we've already been in talks with Todd Phillips, so are we allowed to tell people or no?
We can't really go into too many details. Our people are still talking to his people, but we could give a little glimpse. Leo is interested.
So essentially, me and Nathanael were speaking last night, and I suggested that maybe if they could. The next movie could follow a younger middle-aged Commissioner Gordon, and essentially maybe before he was commissioner, but maybe when he was a detective or whatever, and he could essentially be investigating copycat Jokers throughout the city, and he has to confine with the Joker that's in Arkham right now, and it's kind of like a back and forth cat and mouse kind of thing, and it could be in the vein of like a Silence of the Lambs kind of movie.
Yeah, and I think that would be such a cool movie because then it's like a spiritual sequel to the Joker where it's not an exact sequel and you're getting a new perspective because then the movie would have been told through Jim Gordon's point of view as opposed to the Joker's, but then you're still getting the intrigue and the mystery of the character of the Joker, and I think. In the same way that this Joker movie is very much inspired by Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, you could do one based upon Silence of the Lambs. I think that'd be a really cool sequel. I don't know if they'll actually do a Joker sequel. I know Joaquin Phoenix is saying he'd be interested, and I think Todd Phillips at one point said he might be interested. And money talks. It made a shit ton of money, so maybe they'll make another one. I have two trains of thoughts on this in that I definitely would love to see where the character goes from here. Because he's not done evolving. There's so much more you could do with that character, and where he goes from there. But at the same time, this was a great story. It was a great one-shot film, and if they never visit it again, I'm completely okay with just having this one movie.
I agree. But it would also be cool if they kind of just did like what they did on TV with Gotham without necessarily having Batman, but with just having all the villains, but they made it into like a live cinematic universe, like an R-rated almost cinematic universe.
At the same time though, like I'm definitely a proponent if they want to do more of these kind of, one-shot standalone character study of different villains. I think that's a really cool idea. And in fact, a little bit of a plug for the movie Paradise Show at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time this Saturday live on YouTube. The main topic of that will be discussing the 3 standalone villain movies that I think DC should explore going forward. But I would say that in those, I don't think you should necessarily connect them all within the same universe. I think give the filmmakers the freedom to tell their own stories within their own worlds.
Here I am clamming for standalones, and then we get a standalone, and then I want it to be this huge thing.
Yeah, I know. The irony of it. I know. That's kind of how I feel about this whole thing, is that, like, the part of the great appeal of the Joker was that it was its own thing. And while, it would be cool to see what, in this world that was painted in Joker, what would a Riddler be like in that world? What would, while that kind of thinking, it's fun to think about. I don't really want a whole cinematic universe revolving around this because part of the appeal of this was that it was its own thing. And, so anyways,
I think what added to the appeal too was just because like say like if they did like a spin-off like standalone of or they were just doing like a villain movie with Marvel. We trust the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. With DC, the whole thing's a mess. So I think that also added to it that, okay, this is a Joker movie. We don't have to worry about the continuity of all those movies because it's all over the place.
And I think that's definitely something that works because Marvel never would have made a movie like Joker.
Yes.
Marvel never would have been like, you know what? Let's take our whole thing that we're doing, let's put that on the back burner just for now, and we'll do a one-shot standalone character study of, I don't know, pick any character. They would never do that. Marvel would never make something, or the MCU would never make something like a Logan. They would never, or Deadpool, they would never do these kinds of movies. And that's part of, like, back when we had the Fox era of X-Men that was very loose with continuity, with this sort of DC where they're like, we're kind of doing shared cinematic stuff, but we're also just kind of doing whatever the fuck we want.
Yeah. Whatever works, we do it, and if it don't work, we just scrap it.
Exactly. While I love the MCU and how, like, refined and structured it is, I also like that freedom of, we're just gonna do our own thing and just see what's up. We're just gonna tell one story, and we're just gonna focus on that, and we're not gonna worry about anything else, and we're just gonna do that. I like a studio having the freedom to do that. Like, I like that Fox was able to go, yeah, we're gonna make an R-rated Deadpool movie, and it doesn't have to connect to anything. We're gonna be able to, we can do whatever we want with that. Sure, we're going to do an R-rated Wolverine movie. It doesn't have to connect to any of the other things if we don't want it to. We can just tell our own story.
Yeah.
And I wish Marvel had a little bit more of that freedom. As much as I love the MCU and how structured and how interconnected and all that it is.
I think we have to be grateful, honestly, to the dysfunctional DC universe, because if they had a universe that was like working just as good as Marvel, I don't think we would have got this movie. But since it was just such a mess and like Jared Leto, like no one really cares about that Joker, I think we were able to get this movie.
Yeah. And it just opens up the future for what other kinds of stories we can get. What other, like, they've been I'm gonna save what I was just about to say.
Spoil your own.
I'm gonna save that for Saturday. But anyways, that's gonna do it for our spoiler discussion of Joker. Once again, I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár. I'd like to thank co-host Rob Giachinta for joining us for this discussion.
No problem.
So make sure to check out the Movie Paradise Show, which airs live on YouTube every single Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Rob usually does the show with me. Last week he was not able to join us, and you're not joining us this week, correct?
Correct.
So
I'll be doing the week after.
Yeah. So I'll be doing the show standalone again this Saturday, and do join us for our discussion of the 3 standalone villain movies that I think DC should explore after Joker, because I have some thoughts on some interesting movies that they could do with those characters. So once again, tune in. It's the Movie Paradise Show, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live on YouTube. So thank you for watching us. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe for more content. Be sure to follow us on all of our various social medias at Movie Paradise 99. And until next time, thanks for watching.